closing, he's going to tell us his perspective on our wonderful new candidacy of Kamala and Tim. And I'll hand it over.
All right, well, happy Monday, everybody. How y'all doing? That was the best weather-related metaphor for the mood of the country that I have heard so far as a candidate. And what a perfect day for that metaphor. So how about a round of applause to Linda and Tom for opening up their beautiful home. Are y'all feeling fired up?
Yes.
Ready to go?
Yes.
Okay, I stole that from Barack Obama. But there is a new saying that Madam President has been throwing out, and it's when we fight, we win. And that is the mantra of 2024, and it reminds me so much. I wasn't born in the 1960s, but it does remind me of 2008 when Barack Obama was at the top of the ticket, and the last few weeks have been a level of energy that is just unprecedented in the 2 cycles that I have run for office. And I am so pumped and fired up to win this election in November. And I want to say just thank you to Commit to Democracy for having my back, not just in 2024, but I know many of you were helping in the midterms.
Yes.
And so thank you for doing that. Yes, I see some hands going up. And that's when pundits had written our race off, and everybody said it was unwinnable, and we ended up having one of the closest House races in the country in the midterms, thanks to the work of Commit to Democracy. And as Speaker Pelosi has said to me personally, she said, you are in the second phase of a 1-2 punch, and you're going to finish this job in November. So thank you guys for helping us make that. I know I've had a chance to meet a lot of you, at least virtually, but not everybody, and I want to share just a little bit about my why before I open it up to some questions from the group, and we can talk about kind of what the change at the top of the ticket has also meant for California's 41st congressional district, which is one of the most important House races in the entire country. We only need 4 more seats to get the majority back. This is going to be one of them. So, yeah. So by trade, not in politics. I had an old job that I loved as a federal prosecutor where I worked in national security, counterterrorism, and counterintelligence cases. And that was a job that I had wanted to have since I was a kid, wanted to work in national security. I walked into my first class of the day when I was a junior in high school on September 11th, 2001, saw the North Tower collapse, saw the images of Americans covered in ash on the streets of New York, and started thinking about enlisting in the military. I had a friend who was going to Annapolis, so I started researching some of the service academies. And as I'm seeing that reaction to 9/11 happen with people like my friends who are 17, 18, thinking about enlisting, applying to Annapolis, I'm also seeing stories about Arabic linguists who are being discharged under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And I'm closeted, petrified of being outed, but didn't want to give up on doing something in national security. So I went to Dartmouth, I took Arabic, I applied to the CIA. I sucked at Arabic, I never heard back from the CIA. And that's where my story ends. So thank you, Linda and Tom, so much for hosting everybody today. No, very stubborn and persistent. I made it to Columbia for law school. I clerked for a couple federal judges. Second judge I was clerking for on the Ninth Circuit in Southern California. She said, if you're interested in national security, you should apply to the U.S. Attorney's Office because they have a national security division and you'll love the job. So I applied, was lucky enough to get hired, and she was absolutely right. Loved being a part of the team that helps protect this country from the threats we face from Russia, China, Iran, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. But I was hired in 2016 under the Obama administration, 6 weeks before that presidential election. And what happened after that election? Huge rise in the threats from domestic terrorism, whether it was the white nationalists who were attacking Charlottesville or QAnon conspiracy theorists who went after U.S. Navy hospital ships because they thought that COVID was part of a government plot. I literally prosecuted a guy who tried to derail a train towards a hospital ship because he thought that it had been dispatched as part of a deep state plan. That was something that QAnon had told him. And then January 6th happens, and as I helped my colleagues in Washington, D.C. and the FBI round up about 24 people in Southern California who had flown back after attacking the Capitol, my member of Congress, a guy named Ken Calvert, was voting to decertify the election, voted against the committee to investigate the attack, and then the final straw for me is that he called for dropping charges. So the truth about the first time that I ran for Congress is that I was just pissed off. I didn't think this guy deserved to represent anybody in Congress. I'm not going to lie, it was an impulsive decision. And I really mean that because it was a Trump +7 seat that everybody said was completely unwinnable. And I told my partner, I said, Paolo, I promise I'm only going to do this once. Don't worry. Everyone's telling us we have no shot. Famous last words. Fast forward to November of Election Day in 2022, and I am up against Calvert by over 10,000 votes. The party thinks that I've actually won the election because the registrar told us that the remaining ballots were mail-in. And the reason we had this lead, a big part of it, was redistricting. Palm Springs, Rancho Mirage, Palm Desert, La Quinta, Indian Wells get drawn into Calvert's district for the first time ever in 30 years in Congress. And he's confronting, for the first time in his history, a Democratic majority electorate. He had been in a far-right, deep red seat in Southern California. And suddenly he's got a Dem majority on Election Day, very narrow, in 2022. So there we are on cloud nine thinking we've won. I'm invited to go back to Washington, D.C. for something called New Congress Member Training. Which, I didn't know it existed, and judging from the behavior of many members of Congress, I actually was surprised to learn that they were trained. Marjorie Taylor Greene needs to repeat a few HR sessions. So I get to DC, Speaker Pelosi sees me arrive, and it's late at night, and she's about to lead a private tour of the floor of the House of Representatives for the 18 or so people who have just been elected to Congress. And she sees me entering the chamber, and she says, oh, you could be 218, because 218 was the magic number that Democrats needed to keep the majority in the midterms. And the California races, as many of us recall, were uncalled for many, many days after that election. We were one of the ones that the pundits had written off. And so suddenly on MSNBC, on CNN, on Fox News, they're talking about California 41 for a week straight as being this seat that could be the majority maker for Democrats, one of a very small number that could have been the majority maker. So Paolo, my partner, never been to the US Capitol before. We are in total awe of our surroundings. Here we are on the floor of the House with the first woman ever to be speaker in US history, who is giving us a tour at 11 p.m. at night when the building's closed to the public. And she's talking about the features of the chamber floor. She's talking about the portrait of George Washington on one side of the dais, the portrait of Lafayette on the other. She says, here's the podium where FDR asked Congress to declare war during World War II. And never forget that Abraham Lincoln was once your colleague in this body. And as she says those words, I kid you not about the timing of this. It was surreal. I get an alert on my cell phone from a news outlet beamed out to millions of iPhones in Southern California and really around the country at that point. LA Times, Ken Calvert defeats Will Rollins in California's 41st. Huge buzzkill, you guys. And if you've ever been fired during a job training experience, you can relate very much to what I was going through. And we did what one does when you've been fired during a job training experience. We went to a nearby hotel bar across the street, literally slunk out of the House chamber. And I'm sitting there with my partner, Paolo, and I'm having a little bit of a pity party for myself. I'm going, it's fine. Being in Congress wouldn't have been that cool anyway. You got to fly across country every week. You got to moisturize because of all the dry skin on the plane. You have to always ask people for money. I don't like doing that, and I'm going on and on. And I start thinking about going back to my job at DOJ, and I'm like, I really love trying cases. Like, that was fun, because I got to stand up in court and say I represent the United States of America and get to work with law enforcement to catch bad guys. First case I tried at the department was against the #2 opiate prescriber in the state of California, a doctor who's prescribing Oxycontin for cash, convicted that guy. Second case I tried was against a flight attendant and a drug dealer who were conspiring to bring pounds of cocaine on commercial flights from LAX to JFK. They had stolen the identities of 2 mentally disabled kids to participate in that conspiracy, convicted those people. One of the last cases I tried against a university professor who was selling missile guidance chips to the Chinese military. Convicted that guy. So I'm thinking, man, I was a badass in that job. Let's go back to that. It's so much better than losing a high-profile congressional race. And as I'm having that thought, sitting at the bar, looking up at the screen, there's a TV on. Again, not kidding about the timing of this. This happened right after the midterms, and right after it became clear that Republicans were going to actually get the House. Donald Trump comes out and announces that he's running for president again. And we saw that sitting in D.C., breaking news, develop. And as I see that news, I start thinking about the last set of cases that really prompted me to do this in the first place. The Beverly Hills salon owner standing on the steps of the U.S. Capitol with a bullhorn, calling for angry patriots to bring in their gas masks and weapons to stop the peaceful transfer of power. And then standing in a hallway as a Capitol police officer is crushed in a door by her fellow riders. And as I'm thinking about that, it dawns on me that in this moment, there really is no choice but to run. Because if you can come within 4 points, not quite 400 votes, but 4 points, a very close election, of defeating the longest serving Republican in the House from California, in this moment, you have an obligation to get back into that race when there's a higher turnout, you've got your name ID, and a true opportunity to flip the seat in 2024. And I'm doing it too because the reality is that all of us here are going to be asked that same question generations from now by our kids, our grandkids, our nieces, nephews, generations of Americans to come, which is, what did you do when our democracy was on the line? And my answer is going to be that I beat the longest serving election denier in California. And that is your answer too, by showing up today and being here, by writing those postcards, by contributing. We have had over 600,000 voter contacts in this congressional race. That is one of the highest in the entire country. Thank you for being a part of that. We have broken fundraising records. I mean, I had zero prior experience in sales and fundraising. I mean, it is quite a change to go from national security to suddenly trying to raise the resources to win a congressional seat. But we have raised over $8 million to date. Thank you for helping with that. And we've gotten some incredible endorsements. If you all haven't heard some of the news around the endorsements in this race, former Assembly Republican leader in California endorsed our candidacy. Former Republican sheriff in Riverside County endorsed our campaign. We had a police union that previously endorsed Ken Calvert turn around and flip and endorse us in 2024. And we're getting that support because of my relentless belief, my relentless optimism, and the reality that there are people in America who know that this country is about more than one person, who know that the words in our founding documents, the collective responsibility to make the union more perfect, that is our responsibility. Not that this country was great in the past or was perfect in the past, the look to the future. And as the vice president says, we are not going back. We're going forward. And with her at the top of the ticket, we are not only going to win the White House, we're going to hold the Senate, we're going to flip the floor, we need to get the majority back, and we are going to elect Hakeem Jeffries, the next Speaker of the House of Representatives. So I'm feeling fired up. I'm ready to fight because that's when we win, and I'm ready to